Hello, in this video I want to have a look at the area around Lang Park in Sydney, bordered by Grosvenor, Lang Street and York Street, and further the connections from previous videos just to show that this is definitely part of a connection. Now, just a brief history, what is now Lang Street was originally the original high street, the principal street of Sydney. Augustus Ult was the initial Surveyor General under Captain or Governor Phillip, and later with the arrival of Governor Macquarie the streets were redesigned. Lang Street was reduced, though Lang Park and the other streets were not actually named by him, but that part has his stamp on it, as with so much around Sydney. Now there are a few key points: St Philip's Church, the gaslight lamp and the Gideon Grieve obelisk. Now St Patrick's Church is also on this, but I won't go into that because it's a 1, 2, 3 again of the same sets of numbers, but as with all of these, now I'll cover that in a separate video maybe, but yeah, so St Patrick's, the Catholic cathedral there, is also designed on this plan, 126 feet long by 37 feet wide. It's a 1, 2, 3 of this sun, earth, moon type of system. But there we saw the obelisk, and there is St Philip's Anglican Church. Now that's by the architect Edmund Blacket, who's been a repeated theme throughout this. Now, a few other interesting points. So standing in front of the obelisk, but there's a lamp and there's also a fountain, obelisk themed fountain there. The lamp is of particular importance, the fountain as well, but I'll examine the lamp and the connections to this as well towards the end, because it has definite occult overtones. So we're looking down Lang Street now, which was the principal street of Sydney, looking back towards the Gideon James Grieve obelisk, red granite as well, so that's an important point. And looking over to St Philip's Anglican Church. Now this one was a bit of a strange one because it didn't follow the typical pattern of the architecture by Edmund Blacket, but it's even nicer because of that. Now, another point about this is the continued use of the acanthus plants, such as St Saviour's in Goulburn and so many of the architecture of Edmund Blacket. And otherwise, such as Hyde Park and all across Sydney, in these very key, very important places, acanthus is cultivated deliberately, very importantly, as you can see here. It's not just left to grow; it's part of the plan. This is the acanthus is a very hardy plant, so you have to dig it out from the roots. But as you can see here from St Philip's, or also from St Saviour's in Goulburn, this plant is cultivated. It's part of the plan. It has very deep, very ancient connections to it, and I've gone into that into some recent videos. But of course, the architecture all across Sydney, not exclusive to Edmund Blacket, but the key public buildings, Town Hall, State Library, the Art Gallery, and well, it's who's who, what's what of all of these buildings have this particular system in here. But so St Philip's, Edmund Blacket. Now the typical plan, and as with the other Blacket, it usually has Pythagorean numbers such as 54, 144 in them. This one was a bit of a mystery until I cracked the code on it, and the beauty of it is it's amazing. But it follows the same pattern, but it also proves that this is not just a copy-paste method of architecture, but they use different themes. So this is unusual in that it's 102 feet high, which sort of goes against the standard model, but it's overflowing with information once more. And so there are some of the conversions in SI, the modern scale. So 102 feet is 6.181818 rods, or 17 fathom, 306 hands. But to begin with, 34, it's a Fibonacci number. Previous videos have gone over the use of Fibonacci numbers all across Sydney, and again to these key points, but also as it relates to the golden ratio. Now it's simply about shifting a decimal point. Golden ratio of a golden number, it defines sunflowers, nautilus shells. It's built into nature. It's a beautiful number mathematically and throughout nature as well. It's just amazing. But as an example, some of the points: Sydney Harbour Bridge, 550 yards, and 5,500 ionic yards in Mrs. Macquarie's chair, as well as 377. They also include 144, so the system of Fibonacci numbers is without doubt in there. Elsewhere, Edmund Blacket, for instance, it's 1440 Doric feet high, 144 medieval feet long. Now, the transepts are 14 feet wide, which is 144 Cremona inches. So the Fibonacci numbers, and then as they lead to the golden ratio, is a integral part of this architecture, not just in Sydney, across the world, and not just now, but going back to ancient times. And one of the prime examples of this is one of the holy of holies of ancient sacred architecture, and that's the Great Pyramid of Giza. So it's not a secret, but the slope angle will bring us the golden ratio. I've done some videos. Now you can get the exact golden ratio, but that's a separate topic. But also, so for instance, we also get 0.6181818. If you're into the golden number, you'll also know that 1 over phi is phi minus 1, which is exactly what's happening here. Golden ratio, it's built into this cathedral. Now, coincidence? Okay, maybe, but we'll take that further and we'll show how this all blends together. Now, John 21 in the Bible, 153 fishes, but the net was not torn. Standard symbol across the Christian world and in churches, but there's also a deeper level there. So, for instance, 306 hands is 153 times 2, or the diameter of the circle, 153 the radius, 306 the diameter. On its own, well, again, you might say coincidence, but we can take that further. There's a picture of Chartres Cathedral, how the vesica or the mandorla, the almond, is a standard throughout Christian architecture going back way through, but it's also very much a universal thing. But why is 153 so important? Well, the triangular number. So the 17th triangular number is 153. The 17th multiple of 9 is 153. 1 plus 5 plus 3 equals 9. Any multiple of 9 will give us digits that come back to 9. So 153 being the 17th example, it's also the 17th Tetractys number. There is a very strong connection between the number 17 and the number 153. Also, through the Tetractys and these multiples of 9, we have more examples of the Fibonacci numbers as used. For instance, 144 is the 16th multiple of 9, but in the Tetractys we have multiple references to the Fibonacci numbers, which again lead to the golden number, as we saw earlier. Also at 306 hands. So this building is resonating with this hidden knowledge. Now, it's very, not only Christian, it's also very occult. So, for instance, the Sydney Masonic Centre, 153 panels, 9 times 17. Another reference to this to further back it up. Now, we need to go back way back in time and have a look at the Parthenon. Mark Wilson-Jones did some excellent work regarding the Salamis stone, and also showing how that shows not only that the modern foot is actually ancient, can go back to ancient Greece at least, but it's also a conversion point for Doric and Ionic scales. Pull out a Masonic tracing board. Some of the key, you have these 3 columns throughout these boards, the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. As we can see, cross-reference with the Parthenon, not just is it a school of architecture, it's also schools of measurement, and this is one of the key points, one of the key methods in which measurement is embedded and encoded and passes on this secret knowledge. But oh my, what happens when we convert 102 feet? We get 1530 Doric fingers, or 1700 Ionic fingers, 153 and 17 again. No coincidence, this is part of a pattern. This is bloody genius of how they do this, and there's some very good reasons why they do this, and I'll get to that at the end. But again, we have multiple references, multiple forms, each one of them backing each other up. They come together. Coincidence is impossible in these points. It also shows that this knowledge is being passed down, and the standard history is simply broken. It's false. You can measure it, you can prove it, and so, well, anyway. But now there's some deeper, just to show you how the occult world. Now, it's not exclusive to Freemasonry. I just use that because that's the most modern embodiment of this. But Sydney Masonic Centre, we have the Ionic room. We also have the Doric room, and we'll also have the Corinthian room. There are also 2 other rooms for the Tuscan and the Composite, but they're Roman, so we're sticking with the Greek for the moment. Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, 153 panels. It's a tracing board. Sydney is a tracing board. The Masonic temples are tracing boards, but The acanthus plant, which is planted, of course, in all of the architecture and the buildings by these key architects, is also the inspiration for the Corinthian column. So we have measurements, Doric and Ionic. We also have conversion to the Corinthian. Now, it might be worth revisiting the origins of the Corinthian order, and it's usually accredited to the Greek architect Callimachus, but a freeborn maiden of Corinth, she was of age to marry, and she suddenly became ill and died. Her nurse collected her favourite items and put them into a bell-shaped basket or a crater and placed these on her grave. Now, there are connections to the ancient Greek city of Acanthos in regards to this, but the importance of Acanthus goes back to ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, and the Indus Valley. Now, I haven't revealed how deep that is yet, but I will in the future, because there's a very strong connection going back to the origins of recorded history, and the acanthus plant seems to be at the centre of this. Now, the jar, the crater, was put or the grave, but the nurse didn't realise that there was an acanthus root underneath, and so as winter gave way to spring, the acanthus plant grew forth, and because of the shape of the jar, the leaves of the acanthus were forced to bend and curl around. And this was the inspiration for the Corinthian order. Whether he was aware of the backstory to it, it was observed, at least this is how the legend goes. Callimachus saw this form, the bent acanthus leaves around this jar, and he was inspired to create the Corinthian order, best expressed through the Corinthian capital. But that's not all. You'll find Corinthian architecture, or should I say acanthus-based architecture, again across the modern, the ancient world, Greco-Roman world especially, but also through to the modern world now. Sydney being a prime example of this. The city is built from a blank piece of paper, a relatively new city, but because of that there's been no wars, revolutions, etc., big natural disasters. So we have this framework from the very beginning until the to the modern day, where Sydney's been untouched, and we have this going on. So acanthus and Corinthian, but also connected to Masonics. Now, for instance, I did a video earlier regarding the RPA hospital, very strong Masonic symbolism, Masonic history, Doric, Ionic and Corinthian columns. But also, like, this is a New South Wales Masonic club, and now it doesn't have that form of the three columns on top of each other, but you can see how the Doric column from the tracing board actually fits the lower level columns. Now, on the very top floor there are Ionic form columns, so we have Doric and Ionic expressed in this building. Again, how these structures are actually tracing boards and holding this wisdom, while the corbels at the very top of the building have this acanthus design. Doric, Ionic and acanthus. But also the front door of the Masonic club has this pentagram in it, and the pentagram being one of the most beautiful shapes in nature because of its relationship to the golden ratio, which brings us back to the Fibonacci numbers and throughout Sydney architecture, how this is encoded through weights and measures. And now 153, the 17th tetractus, that connects triangular number, brings us to the name of God as expressed in Kabbalism. We see a tetractus form there, but the tetractus there with the dots, the initiates into Pythagorean number cults, or the Pythagorean schools, swore an oath upon the tetractus. Ancient origins, various forms, but these all link back together. 153 in the occult world, 153 in the Christian world, and the Christian world is actually just it's the occult. It's been brushed over, but it's just a fact throughout the Bible. All these very special, very sacred, including 144, the Fibonacci is in there. Also notice standard tracing board figures include the sun and the moon. How does that connect to 153? Well, the square root of 153 is the number of full moons, or the synodic months per year, which is 29.53 days between a full moon. Strong connections again, but even visually. So the vesica, as we see there, is a beautiful description of the eclipse, and the eclipse is because of the synodic month. That's how we measure them. That's how the ancients, such as the people in Stonehenge, were able to calculate and predict them using their system. So here is a model. So a synodic month, there's 12.369 of these per year on average. It's one orbit of the moon around the earth in relation to the sun. Sun, earth and moon. Another beautiful harmony about the synodic month is that there are 29.53 days per synodic orbit on average. Varies a little bit either way, but that's the average per year, as in 12.369 and how these connect. But multiply the diameter of the earth by 29.53 and you get the distance between the earth and the moon. Sun, earth and moon harmonize. Now here we see the earth and the moon in relation in size to the sun. Of course the sun is much further away, and from this, the synodic month, there is another beautiful harmony, one of nature's most spectacular sights, and that's the solar eclipse. So as we put the earth, moon and sun in proportion to one another, we're going to find that something very beautiful, something very extraordinary happens, and that of course is the solar eclipse. Now it's not just visually spectacular, it's also the proportions that are very spectacular. So now we put the moon into its proper orbit in relation. And what happens? Well, every 29.53 days the moon passes between the earth and the sun. Because of the wobble of the earth, we have something very special happening. Every once in a while, occasionally, we have a total solar eclipse because the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, but the moon is 400 times closer to the earth. Beautiful harmony represented in nature, not defined by man. And that's what, again, not only is the eclipse visually spectacular, it's also an astronomical wonder. And now, as best we know, that doesn't appear to happen anywhere else in the universe. The moon is unusually large and unusually close to the earth, and that's why we possibly may be the only planet in the universe to witness this spectacular view. And that's why it was, because the ancients knew this stuff. They knew the earth was round. They had a very good idea of the size. But recent videos, so for instance, the Sydney Town Hall are decorated with acanthus, but 29.5321 Doric fathom. Doric. As where previous video, Centennial Park, the columns, which come from the museum building, which of course is decorated with acanthus. Across the road in Hyde Park, lots of acanthus growing, James Barnett, and the columns themselves are acanthus plants in Centennial Park, and they also feature the acanthus design, the Corinthian capital. They're not true Corinthian. Acanthus, again, in Freemasonry, of course, I have to mention Rosicrucians, others too, but this plant, and we see the pentagram and the beauty of Phi. So again, just connection to connection. But so that's St. Philip's. What else do we have? So in Lang Park, across the street, we had the obelisk, red granite, St. Philip's, and we have the gaslight lamp. In itself, another connection to this, and a connection we can examine through the tracing boards. And so let's do a comparison of an older board as with a newer one. Doric, Ionic and Corinthian has standards. Sun and moon has standards. Faith, hope and charity has standards. Now Jacob's ladder is the ladder leading up to that star there, and we have a heart, we have an anchor, and we have the cross. Faith, hope and charity. While on this newer one on the right, we still have all these features, but we also have faith, hope and charity as these three dancing figures. This is a representation. They might change over time symbolically, but they have the same method. Now, how does that connect to Lang Park? Well, we have a gas lamp. Now, a light, which is an interesting connection as well, and we see the base of the light. We have this acanthus leaf pattern again. Triangular base, equilateral triangle, but that's... there's more connections to that because we go back to ancient times, 4th century BC, the acanthus column as it's called, or the dancers of Delphi. The three female figures with the three acanthus leaves coming off of it. All of this knowledge, all of these tracing boards, Rosicrucians, Oddfellows, Freemasons, all trace this back to ancient times, and I'm using Greco-Roman, but it goes back further. Now, question sort of, well, why are these particular numbers? Well, sunflowers is a perfect example. It's beautiful, it's in nature, this is a natural thing, this is the divine number, the divine proportion it's called, and that's a reason why it's called that, because sunflowers, nautilus shells, basically every flower you can think of, plants, everything have this pattern in here. Why 153? Why that many fish in the net? Why 153 panels? Because not only is it a beautiful number in arithmetic, the big Smith graph as well in geometry, but also again in arithmetic, geometry, astronomy. Now, I don't know of any myself, but I'd be willing to bet that there's also some very profound musical connections in all of this, as there are. The acanthus is an ancient plant. Now, it goes back well before Greco-Roman times, in the Indus Valley, Sumer, and Egypt. Now, there's no documentation, that hasn't been published anywhere, but I guarantee you I've done a lot of research on this, and I can prove it without a doubt, because there is no other plant that fits the bill. It goes back to the ancient times and the flood myths, especially Epic of Gilgamesh and the Manu and the cycles of destruction, such as in the Yugas. And the Yugas, of course, connect to all these numbers too. So, but why the secrecy? Why do they particularly do it in this particular fashion? Well, firstly, language is transient. It can get lost in translation within a generation. You get a dictionary that's 10 years old, compare it to now, words change. So that's one reason why. Secondly, consider Giordano Bruno. He suggested that the heliocentric model, and he was burned at the stake for it by religious zealots. Hypatia, going back to, again, ancient times, she come from the Egypt Library of Alexandria in Egypt, which was burned down. She was murdered by the mob. What did she do? Well, she proposed a heliocentric model, and amongst other things, this knowledge is not only profound, but it's also very dangerous in the wrong times. Now, there's lots of examples. Now, that's not just, you might think, well, the Inquisition and these superstitious times is over. Well, no, it isn't. We still get these types of things, that Freemasons are Satanists, they're evil, and all of that, connecting Bohemian Grove and these other things which have nothing to do with this occult world. They're one branch which has attached themselves to it, but that's nothing to do with this. This is it's in the Bible, it's in the old books, it's in the Vedic scriptures, it's in the Ark of Utnapishtim. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, these are the newest incarnations. They're the ones who have passed it on through ancient times, but it goes back way beyond, and the ignorance and the hatred is only beneath the surface. So people who are in the occult will be called all sorts of horrible things, or even though the sciences which people use, the technology which they use to transmit this, is actually part of is built from this. It's occult knowledge, and that's so I'm often critical of skeptics and the new materialists, but at least they're not threatening, they're not dangerous in that way, as where those who would brand the Hermetic code as this don't realise that Christianity, Islam are all actually deeply rooted in the occult world, and there's the shame. It's something that can be proven and measured and tested over and over again. The Hermetic code is alive and well, Sydney being one, a modern example to show how it, not just in pre and early industrial revolution times up till now, but as I've showed, it has its origins very strongly in the ancient world, the Greco-Roman era, but well before that. There's something called the Ancient Dark Age. So basically 1300 BC to about 800 BC, there was this a dark age fell on the earth, and there was a dark age of information. The Greco-Roman period simply revived it. It actually goes back much further. The Greeks and Romans are ancient to us. To the Romans and Greeks, the Sumerians and Egyptians were ancient history to them. It gets born and it gets trampled through catastrophe, but also through mob mentality, religious extremism, and very strong, another way to say it, intentional ignorance. That's the only way to say it. So anyway, so this is another example of the code here in Sydney. The way it's been passed on through symbolism, still, it's a very powerful method. If, as Rudyard Kipling said, if history was told as stories, it would never be forgotten. Well, it's also told as measurement and very specific, very special, very beautiful numbers, which resonate and show us much of the universe around us. Now, hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.